In Clayton County, a Jonesboro warehouse consumed in a dangerous multi-million-dollar chemical fire. Thousands of school children and adults forced to evacuate.
A huge fire burning throughout the day at a swimming pool manufacturing plant in Jonesboro.
This fire broke out shortly after dawn this morning and rapidly escalated into a major problem for Clayton County firefighters. Some of those firefighters are still on the scene on Tara Boulevard in Jonesboro. They tell Eyewitness News some hot spots are still burning at the site. You can see the fire right now. The fire threw a plume of black smoke into the air, raising fears of toxic fumes threatening local residents. Evacuations had to be ordered in the area. We'll have more on that in a minute. But first, TV5's Paul Yates has been on the scene in Jonesboro all day long.
Firemen raced here just after 7 this morning. Flames quickly engulfed this warehouse and manufacturing facility. Inside were sheets of acrylic and other materials used to make swimming pools and hot tubs. Initially, authorities feared that chlorine gas was escaping into the air, a concern later ruled out. But evacuations of schools and homes and businesses quickly began. Eventually, 10 to 15,000 people left a 1-mile area around the fire. Environmental protection officials said the smoke fumes were hazardous, but not deadly.
It's not deadly to the point where you're going to take a big breath of it and you're going to keel over. But it can certainly, a large dose of it can certainly do some very, very severe damage to your health.
Firefighters worried about shifting winds, but weather conditions generally kept the smoke moving into the atmosphere where it dissipated. Water was poured on the fire through the morning, but the flames would not go out.
What we're going to do now is we've got foam called in from various locations. When we get enough here, we're going to try to extinguish the fire.
But the foam, like the water, would not put out the flames. This afternoon, authorities decided to let the fire burn. A manager of the pool company said the firm employed about 150 people. And he said there had been no previous indications that something like this might happen.
We have TV monitors in the building, 8 cameras, and we check them periodically during the night, looking for any problems. And we have a security man who walks around in the building at 8 o'clock, again at midnight, and everything was fine at midnight.
Just before 3 this afternoon, firefighters tried a heavier dose of foam with equipment brought in by the city of Atlanta from Hartsfield Airport. This attempt was successful. The worst of the fire was put out. Jonesboro's volunteer fire department had been helped by other firefighters in neighboring counties and cities.
And they've all offered everything they could to help us, and without them, we'd still be having a fire and a evacuation problem for probably a couple of days or longer.
Right now, firefighters are plowing through debris. They are finding hot spots, pockets of fire, and they are pouring water on them. Most of the fire is out. The evacuation was lifted here about 4 this afternoon. And throughout the day, of course, most of the concern was to ensure that people, especially school children and the elderly, were kept out of harm's way. Cynthia Good has been keeping track of the evacuation.
At the gymnasium.
It was a parent's nightmare. Thousands of students from 8 schools evacuated. By late today, many parents were still looking for children. Finally, Charlene Bloodworth found hers.
I called my sister-in-law about Brown, and I thought the school was on fire, and then so we were looking for her daughter, and then it comes up that mine is here also.
Everybody started crying and were real scared and all.
About 3,000 students from 2 elementary schools and part of a junior high school ended up here at Jonesboro Senior High School today. Parents were able to pick up their children if they wanted to, though school did stay in session. At day's end, remaining students were brought back into the evacuation center to all but one of the schools they were forced to leave, so their parents could find them.
You can get away, okay?
Evacuations affected everyone in downtown Jonesboro. The courthouse shut down. Jurors didn't know what to do.
One judge sent everybody home for the day in his court. And another judge says, well, I've got to have a panel at 11.
So you don't know what to do?
No.
The jail was evacuated. About 20 inmates were transported to the new facility in Lovejoy.
Everybody's been real cooperative and been being moved real well.
Shops closed. Dean Chapman locked up her furniture store and kept her animals in the van, away from home, away from the danger zone.
I'm not afraid, but I just think it'd be better to move than start not being able to breathe.
Evacuated daycare centers brought toddlers here. The elderly came too. 73-year-old Thelma Waldrop's apartment complex was too close to the blaze.
My niece lived second apartment from me. She come down there and got me, said, come on, let's go. So we went.
By late afternoon, Valerie Lyons didn't know where she and her 5 children, including a 6-day-old baby, would spend the night. She and others came to the Morrow City Hall by car, by van, and by the busload. This was the official evacuation center.
In a heavy emergency, we could probably sleep 200 people, double-decker, provided we had all the bunks, that many bunks.
Now, of course, they won't need those beds. As Paul reported, the evacuation was lifted a couple hours ago. All 159 people who were at Morrow City Hall, that evacuation center, have now been sent home. Right now, we are reporting live from downtown Jonesboro. I don't know if you can see behind me, but all the businesses are still closed. Some of them do have notes in the windows which say they will be reopening for business tomorrow.
All right, Cynthia, good reporting from downtown Jonesboro. Thank you. One major problem that developed as schools and the courthouse were being evacuated was traffic. Police had a tough time for a while trying to make sure that roads out of town weren't blocked because of the evacuation. And at Terra Boulevard and Flint River Road, the site of the huge fire, emergency vehicles needed all of the room they could get, so Terra Boulevard was closed down. Traffic rerouted around that problem. TV5's Jim Schuler joins us now live from Clayton County. Jim, have they opened up any of the thoroughfares at this point?
Well, as a matter of fact, Jim, they're all open right now. The traffic situation in Clayton County is looking much, much better than it did earlier today. We're here at I-75 and Highway 41 in Clayton. Just a few minutes ago, we finished driving the major arteries in this area. They're all clear tonight, moving along as they normally would at this time of day. I-75 and Highway 85 moving along at a normal pace. And Highway 41, that's Terra Boulevard, the road where the fire was, that's also moving well in both directions except right in front of the fire. And the only problem there is the rubberneckers slowing down to get a better look at what used to be a warehouse. And that's pretty much the traffic situation here, Jim. Back to you folks.
All right, Jim, thanks very much. Glad that the worst problem we got is people gawking at the biggest story of the day, I guess. Thanks a lot. Firefighters tell us that the hardest part of fighting a fire like this one today in Jonesboro is simply determining just how dangerous the situation is. TV5's Morse Diggs found out today that dealing with a chemical hazard requires close coordination from everyone who is involved.
When a chemical emergency occurs, there's no time for jurisdictional turf struggles. Emergency crews must, of course, consider the safety of the public, as well as the often unpredictable nature of the hazard they must confront.
You've got the danger of these drums being involved in the fire and then exploding, being hurled through the air and essentially killing anyone that gets in its way. A tremendous amount of energy being released.
At first, officials feared highly toxic chlorine gases might be escaping from materials used at the Tallman Pool Company. But later, it was discovered that the major problem involved a chemical used to make hot tubs. The chemical, methyl methacrylate. When it burns, carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide fumes are released, deadly in high concentrations. But the direction of the wind played a big part in limiting the potential danger, according to the head of the state emergency response team. As long as the fumes traveled straight up in the air, the chemical would dissipate. Because most cities in Georgia do not have all the resources necessary to deal with a major chemical hazard, Coordinator Jimmy Kirkland says Jonesboro had to call on its neighbors. How did the intergovernmental effort work in this case?
I think they've gone quite well.
Kirkland praised Clayton County officials for recognizing the problem and asking the right questions. State and federal environmental officials provided one expertise. Area fire departments also provided assistance. Atlanta has the resources to keep a fully staffed hazardous material team ready to answer any call. Atlanta Fire Captain Bruce Borders says so many chemicals are now being used, a spill or a fire presents a much greater danger than a house fire.
You have to worry about air pollution, you have to worry about soil pollution, you have to worry about water pollution, so we may be able to put out something, but by putting it out, we'll kill all the fish in the Chattahoochee or something like that, so we have to be careful what we put out.
The state has a Hazardous Chemicals Advisory Committee to map strategy for providing emergency coverage for the entire state.
Problem we seem to see more and more often, don't we?
Very much so. They just reactivated this committee.
Tallman Pool Company in Jonesboro is now under control. Firefighters are still on the scene where some hot spots are still burning. The people in the Jonesboro area that had to be evacuated earlier in the day are either home or they're on their way back from temporary shelters where they'd been set up in the county earlier in the day. Again, fire apparently
most of it over.
Let's hope it's good news from here on. Still ahead on Eyewitness News, George Bryant will tell us about the Tallman Pool Company where today's chemical fire broke out shortly.
Baffled about the cause of that spectacular fire at the Tallman Pool Company. From our South Bureau at the Clayton News Daily, word that things are back to normal for nearby residents the day after the plant went up in flames. TV5's George Bryant joins us now with the latest on the search for answers. How are they doing?
Well, right now, Pam, the State Fire Marshal's office would like to know what happened and what caused that fire yesterday. Today, the fire investigators were able to pinpoint the origin of the fire. They say it was in the northwest corner of the plant. Only one hot spot remains. The job now is to find out what caused the Tallman Pool Company to explode like a volcano. Today, the State Fire Marshal was combing through the rubble, trying to piece the puzzle together.
There's an area within the building that we'll be confining our investigation at this point in time. And this is the area where the fire was first noted, it first vented itself. And this will be the area that we're going to try to find out what happened.
The chemical fire created concern yesterday. A toxic cloud forced the evacuation of nearby schools, businesses, and homes. Today, students returned to class and workers returned to their jobs in downtown Jonesboro.
Just picking up where we left off on the case that we were on.
The plant lost about $8 million worth of pools, hot tubs, and raw materials. Tonight, company officials hope the road to recovery is short.
We've got some of the phone lines working now, and we've had a lot of our dealership network across the country calling in to check and see if we're still going to be able to supply them, and we're pretty sure we'll be back in production of small source in the next few weeks.
This is another piece of the shrapnel that came out of the building yesterday.
Today, we were reminded how dangerous a firefighter's job is. This is one of several chunks of metal that shot out of the fire like a cannonball. Protective headgear prevented one firefighter from being injured.
If you have a fire and like the resin tank explodes or propane tank explodes, you just got massive fire for, several hundred yards in all directions.
More than 24 hours later, the Jonesboro Fire Department was still on the scene, keeping an eye on the plant. The department is made up of volunteers. Yesterday was an experience they'll never forget.
This is the largest fire I've fought. It was scary at times, but it was worth it.
Now tonight, the State Fire Marshal's office says it may be several days before we find out what happened.
Thank you very much, George.